Hello and welcome. I'm Robbie,
And I'm Jay.
and you're joining us for episode 14 of Generations Apart, the podcast where we chat about gaming technology across the generations, sharing our perspectives on the past and our excitement for the future. On today's episode, we are chatting about modern handheld gaming. Coming off the back of our retro handheld gaming episode, we're now focusing at what's out there in the market now and what you can take advantage of. Before we get into that, though, Jay, what's piqued your interest this week? And also,
Robbie.
where are you?
Where in the world is Jay? So yes, for the keen-eyed over on YouTube, you will notice this is not my normal background. And I apologise if there's any audio challenges throughout the episode. I am in a hotel room in London. I'm wearing a training course, so not in my usual location and not with my usual technology. So hopefully this works. Hopefully the audio on my side is up to snuff. Robbie's voice will be crisp and beautiful as always. Mine might be a little bit sketchy on this hotel Wi-Fi, but we'll see how we get on. So in terms of piquing my interest, Robbie, I actually picked up, quite fortunately, on a news item that's dropped today. So hot on the press as we record this on the 24th. By the time you'll listen to it, will be a few days old. And it is the news that Apple has won one of, I think there's many against them at the moment, its antitrust court battles with Epic Games. So this, we touched on this very briefly on our last episode, funnily enough. And this has been an ongoing court battle between Epic Games, the makers of Fortnite, and Apple. And it's all to do with Apple's App Store and the monopoly that is the App Store when it comes to the Apple ecosystem. And I guess the charges as well that Apple levy on vendors selling their products through that store. So for those who don't know, I think the figure is 30%, Robbie?
I think it's 30%.
Is the fee. So anything you buy from a supplier through an app that you got through the App Store, which of course is the only way to install apps on iPhone, comes with a 30% tax as far as the selling firm is concerned. And Epic didn't like that, so they didn't want Apple to have access to the revenue they generate through Fortnite and the Battle Pass and their vending store. So they circumvented it, and Apple didn't like it and swiftly booted Fortnite off the App Store. Epic then went to war with Apple over this. Excuse me. And essentially, Apple have today won one of their appeals. I think it's in the US Court of Appeal.
Antitrust focus appeal. Yeah.
That's right. So they have been found not guilty, if you like, of the claims levied against them by Epic, which basically mean at the moment the force or the pressure on Apple to allow other app stores and to cut that revenue hasn't come off. So we were talking last time out about this likely being a feature in the latest version of iOS,
The
ability to sideload apps. Yeah, and this kind of flies in the face of that, or goes against that, and would, for now at least, that pressure is easing on Apple. They still may do it. There's plenty of other reasons to do it, and there'll be other jurisdictions they fight in this battle in. But this is an interesting case and could become a precedent as far as the US is concerned, in that Apple have yet again, I think this is the second or third appeal, I think it says in the article. We'll share the details for you to have a read of if you want to look. But I thought it was really interesting to see, especially so quickly off the last episode, that we've seen some progress in these court battles. So it just caught my eye early today when I was looking for something to talk about on the show, and I thought it was appropriate.
Yeah, really interesting news. I wasn't expecting that because, I mean, it's not just Epic that were against Apple on this. There was, a whole industry of services and apps that ran through the Apple Store that also disagreed with Apple's practice on this. So I'm quite surprised that nothing has come out of it that they are guilty of. Especially, I wonder how this will affect other services, because I know, for example, that YouTube Premium, one of the ways that you buy it is either directly through the YouTube app itself, or if you buy it through the Apple Store, it costs like £2 more. And I wonder how things like that will start to affect, because if they were trying to circumvent purchases and that's what they've lost against, as in Epic have lost that battle. I
Well,
can't
that's it.
imagine
So
it might be a similar argument that that Google might have to stop doing that in terms of having different prices on the Apple Store to do their services normally if they are adding on cost because they're fully aware of that 30% fee.
well, it says here, just quoting from the article, so it said that Epic Games, the mobile game maker, had hoped to prove in its appeal that Apple had acted unlawfully by restricting app distribution on iOS devices to Apple's App Store, which required payments to go through its own processor while preventing developers from communicating to customers about alternative ways to pay. But as a result, this is considered a major setback for Epic Games and other developers who hope the ruling could set a precedent for further antitrust claims and force Apple to open iOS devices to third-party app stores and payment systems. So I guess on this basis, that pressure has eased for now. It won't go away. I think what's quite interesting here is it said that it says here that Epic Games, regardless, had failed to establish as a factual matter its proposed market definition and the existence of any substantially less restrictive alternative for Apple to accomplish the pro-competitive justifications supporting iOS's walled garden ecosystem. So there you go.
Interesting. And you were talking about Epic sharing the stage with Apple at the WWDC conference. So
yeah, it seems unlikely, doesn't it?
it seems more unlikely now. Yeah.
Well, what's interesting? Well, I don't know. Maybe they're settling up, so maybe they've got to find a way through this. But there is a second part to the story, so it's not entirely in Apple's favour. I should point out, just for fairness, as I am there, I don't want to be considered to be Apple bias, that there were some local laws which Apple lost out on, which ruled in Epic's favour, which was California's unfair competition law, but it really doesn't do much for the case or do much for Epic. This was very much a win for Apple, really. So we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, interesting. Fair enough. Another interesting
What about you,
Apple
Robbie?
news.
What piqued your interest?
So this week, well, actually, I think it broke the week before, but I saw it this week. It's the news about Sega purchasing the Angry Birds maker Rovio, and it was quite a large purchase as well. If I'm right, if I'm thinking about it correctly, it's $775 million. It is the purchase of Sega for Rovio. Rovio's the European-based mobile app company mostly, but I just thought it was an interesting story because it'll be interesting to see if there's going to be more Sega games that are released on mobile now, and quite topical for today actually if we're talking about portable gaming and things like that. If there are some more Sega stuff, I know there's quite a few already on the stores now, but maybe they'll develop new games through Rovio.
I must admit, I saw this and I thought, what a weird story. One, because to be perfectly honest, I don't think Angry Birds has been relevant or really relevant for quite a number of years now. I know they're still there. They're still toys. They've done a couple of movies.
There's movies? I didn't know there was movies.
Yeah, there's 2 Angry Birds movies. They did something, and I watched the first one. It's fine. I haven't seen the second one. But it's, I just think it's a weird one because Angry Birds has had its day. It's a fun game. I'll say the VR version on the Quest is actually quite a lot of fun. But it's, it had its big peak quite a number of years ago. This is not like a recently trending, just fallen off. This is years ago now. Angry Birds was big. I think at the birth of Twitter, this was really something that was getting quite large. So to spend that sort of money, I know they're not just buying Angry Birds, they're buying the company. So, there may well be other properties that aren't getting reported here that Rovio make because it can't just be Angry Birds. It's a hell of a lot of money. In fact, there you go. In the article, it says,
Star Wars crossover.
Angry Birds was released back in 2009.
Yeah, there's other IP, I think.
Yeah. Or Star Wars.
Is that the Angry Birds Star Wars crossover?
Yeah, it's not specific Star Wars titles, and they were fine. Again, they were good. But I don't know.
I feel like there's a lot
of money. Yeah,
there is a lot in that universe, though. There's lots of different versions now, and they are still developing new versions of Angry Birds. And there must still be thousands, millions even of users.
It would be interesting to see some stats, wouldn't it? Because that's a hell of a lot of money And honestly, what's weird about this is it wasn't that long ago that Sega
Top
were
comment.
heavily rumored.
I wasn't aware that Rovio was still relevant.
There you go. See, Swaggerlicious Johnson agrees with me. Um, it's only relevant if you're watching on YouTube. That'll mean nothing to anyone listening on audio. It's a comment on the post. Um, I was going to say that what was interesting is it wasn't that long ago that Sega were being rumored as one of the many game studios that Xbox was circling when
Really?
Xbox went on their shopping spree. In fact, they
Mm.
were really strongly rumored to have been in talks with Xbox about being bought up. So it's interesting now to see they've gone the other way and spent nearly, I think it's nearly $1 billion, isn't it? Is the figure that's quoted
775 million.
further up. It was rumored to be a
It
billion, yeah,
was
so it's
rumored,
down
yeah.
slightly. But even so, $775 million is a lot of money to spend. When the rumors were not that long ago, you were on the verge of a buyout yourself.
Mm.
So strategically for Sega, it's a strange one. Again, if it's not like they're making consoles anymore, it's not like this becomes an exclusive for their device. So this just becomes another game product and another developer
Mm.
in their suite. I mean, they still make quite a few games. They've still got obviously Sonic, one of their biggest
Yeah.
franchises ever. They are the people behind Football Manager, which every year sells a ton.
Mm-hmm.
So it's and then I'm sure they've got loads of other franchises that I'm not remembering, but
Yeah.
just strange to see them out shopping.
Interesting point about Microsoft and Xbox. It does feel like Rovio would be the ideal candidate to be purchased actually by someone like Microsoft. Didn't they purchase the company that made Candy Crush recently?
I don't know, did they?
Microsoft, yeah, I think they did. So yeah, I don't know.
They bought a lot of developers
Yeah.
a year or two ago. Although if you Google Xbox and their development studios at the moment, there's a whole lot of discord on the internet around them mismanaging
Mm.
their developers.
What happens
I
when
think
you
it was
acquire all these different companies with different practices and
what was it recently? It was a game called Redfall. I think is due to come out any moment if it isn't already out now. And the big news that broke recently was that the developers were unable to reach 60 FPS on
ooh,
the Series X. So it was going to release initially with 30 FPS, and then they were going to patch it in later on. And this was a game that was originally going to be multi-console, and then was sort of caught up in the Microsoft purchasing round when they bought a load of studios, became an exclusive, and as an exclusive, the developers have failed to get this to sort of properly harness the power of the Xbox and to run sustainably
mm,
at 60 FPS. And of course, all the fanboys were straight on that then and giving Microsoft a load of crap, and all the Xbox fans were kind of head in hands going, "Oh God, not another crushing blow to this generation and the last few." So, it's been a tough time if you're an Xbox fan, and
So
yeah,
you're an Xbox
the
fan as well.
development.
We should probably clarify the audience. You're not piling on that.
I own an Xbox and I've had multiple Xboxes. I wouldn't call myself a fan in the sense of the fanboy wars. I'm kind of agnostic when it comes to the games consoles. I own all three of the current gen, so
Mm.
I, I own one and I like my Xbox. I'm not kind of in that realm of arguing on the internet about which is better. I own them all, so I don't really care. I ultimately want to play the best game in the best place with a controller.
Yeah, yeah.
Not with a keyboard and mouse
It
before you say a
just
word.
works. That's Jay's model, remember?
Yeah, it just works. And I'll honestly say that 30 FPS thing does not bother me in the slightest. I would sit and
Doesn't
play it
bother
at
me.
30 FPS and it probably wouldn't really register for me. I am much more interested in graphical fidelity than I am frames per second, but I know that you've got a keen eye for it, and like many gamers, it would bother you. It genuinely wouldn't bother me. I think Gears of War had always previously been locked at 30
Really?
for style purposes. Yeah,
Style
the
purposes.
first three
Very
were definitely locked.
cinematographic kind
That
of.
was why it was done. It was from a cinema perspective. I think online multiplayer was 60. I could be wrong with that. Someone will correct me in the chat if that is wrong or in the comments. But yeah, anyway, doesn't bother me. 30 FPS, don't care. But for a lot of people, it's a big deal. So
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, there you go. That's the what piqued my interest this week was the. It'll be interesting to see what games they come out with. Sega and Rovio. Yeah.
Robbie, is that the first time in Generations Part that you've brought a video game related piqued my interest?
I think it might be. I think it might be. You've
That's
infected my
bizarre.
newsfeed, Jay. That's what's happened.
Oh, ha, ha.
I'm getting all these recommendations now.
Yeah,
uh,
fantastic.
cool.
Long may it continue.
Okay, cool. So today we're chatting about modern handheld gaming. And so, yeah, we chatted about retro gaming a while ago now. It was back when we were in your studio, and we cracked out a few of the consoles that you had. So the old Game Boys and PSPs. So we're looking back on the history of handheld gaming. And now I think we want to look at, originally I think we're going to do this all in one episode with the modern gaming as well, but there's just so much to talk about in both camps that it was worth having a dedicated episode on the more modern handheld gaming with the likes of the Switch, the Steamdeck, and a bunch of other really fun ones that I want to show off today that you've probably never heard of unless keen eye for this space. So in my research for this, it broadly broke down into a couple of different versions of handheld gaming. So there's the platform-specific ones, which actually really there's only the Switch out now, which is that kind of walled garden Nintendo-only games. And they've obviously got now more third-party games from different studios in there, but it's very much you have to get the cartridges or buy the games from their store to work on their system. So it's that kind of traditional console-like handheld gaming with the Nintendo Switch. And then the other side is the more open, similar to the Android and Apple debate. We're going to go down that again.
Here we go again.
Yeah, the more
Yes,
open.
which camp I fall into?
Yeah. The more open and kind of free, a bit more flexible, I guess, is the aim for the other ones, and that's the likes of the Steam Deck. I've got a few other examples as well where it's basically just Windows loaded onto a handheld device, where you can run whatever games from Steam or other launchers and stuff that you might do from PC. It's PC gaming on the go, basically. And then there's some other random ones that I've got into to show off today as well. But those were the two main ones I thought was the console-like specific ones, like the Nintendo. And you might have some other recommendations on that as well, because Switch was the only one I could really think of. And then there's the more PC-style games of like the Steam Deck, and there's the Ioneo and lots of other Windows-style devices as well. So the way we're going to break this down, and this is just purely because my research it made the most sense, is I was just going to go through a few of the devices and share what's on offer, what kind of games you can play, what the limitations are, and what's going to come out soon as well. I think there's some rumors on a few other devices that might be coming out even this year, in the next few months, in tech June, July, when there's a billion conferences that I might be missing. Okay, so starting with the Switch, and I want to start with the Switch just because I know you've got one, Jay.
Mm-hmm.
So the Switch has a 720p screen. It obviously has the Nintendo ecosystem, so lots of Nintendo games on there, like Mario Kart's on there, got Smash Bros, Pokemon. It's quite a unique handheld console compared to the retro ones, definitely. It has the two detachable controllers on the side. At least we're talking about the normal Nintendo Switch, and I should mention there's a few different versions of the Nintendo Switch, but we'll maybe touch on that in a bit. But Nintendo Switch has the Joy-Cons on the right, on the right and left, and you can even unplug them to play remotely like a normal controller with that 7-inch screen. I don't have a Switch myself. My wife has a Switch, but I was going to ask you first, what's your experience been like handheld gaming with the Switch?
I really like the Switch. I'll be honest, when it was first announced, and there's somewhere in the deepest, darkest corners of YouTube, there's a reaction video from me and a friend back in the day.
No way.
Watching the Switch get announced, and I just all over it, for want of a better word. I thought it was a complete ridiculous concept.
Really?
I had no idea why I'd want this thing. The irony, I know. But like most modern kind of gaming consoles, I ended up buying it anyway, and I really liked it. I'm on my second Switch now. The first Switch, the launch Switch, has been very much absorbed by my wife and children, and they play that regularly. And it's still now 5 or 6 years on, is getting regular use. Lots of frequent use from the kids. I treated myself to the OLED.
Nice.
So I have the OLED version, which looks great. It is a markable improvement from a screen quality perspective. Obviously, no other hardware improvement there, so it's not like any main boost to the power or the graphics or anything like that. But it does play really well, and I've got quite a decent collection of Switch games now, both digital and more recently been sort of flipping to buy physical now as I've kind of grown my own personal collection. Couple of things to mention. You mentioned multiple versions. I've just touched on two of them, and of course, let's not forget the Switchless Switch that doesn't do what the name says it should do, which is the Switch Lite, which is the purely handheld Switch that doesn't dock and doesn't play on TVs and doesn't have detachable controllers. So the irony is not lost on.
Oh, I didn't realize that's why it was called the Switch. It's because you can have it.
Yeah, because you can switch from handheld to TV.
Docked and plugged into a TV.
Yeah. It's the Nintendo Switch, and then they brought out a console that doesn't switch, and called it the Switch. So
Switch
anyway, yeah, exactly. Also, one thing to mention, which you didn't mention those resolutions, is that it can be up to 1080p when docked.
Oh, okay.
So the docking process does give, I don't know how, it does give it additional capabilities in terms of resolution. But in this sort of age of 4K gaming on latest gen, it doesn't really do much, does it really? But it doesn't need it, and this has always been the test, I suppose. And what Nintendo have always done well is their software. Their software has really helped to sell that system, and ironically, their old software, because most of the most popular titles on the Switch were Wii U titles that didn't sell well at the time because the Wii U was a flop, so they were ported. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is the all DLC, or was the all DLC in version of the Wii U game. It's not new, and then of course they've added a whole load of tracks and like a season pass to it now, and it's now the definitive experience. Smash Brothers was the same, very much sort of just extending that and making that the definitive edition. But the library is excellent on the Switch, I have to say, whether that's indie titles or the mainline Nintendo stuff. It doesn't do, high fidelity, really sort of beefy next gen gaming. I think we touched on that in the past when we talked about streaming.
Yeah,
the fact that the Nintendo Switch has a sparing list of titles, mainly Capcom games that you can stream to the Switch, but you can't play locally. Yes. So the Resident Evil collection of games and a few others.
They've got like The Witcher 3 on there, though. Yeah.
Yeah, but if you've seen it, it's what they had to do to that game to make it run on the Switch. They really muddied the graphics, significantly reduced the draw distance. Yeah, it doesn't look very good. If you've got no other way to play The Witcher, then you can run it, but it's not the definitive. It's not a good way to play The Witcher. You've only got to look at a few videos online to see that. But yeah, I think the Switch is a great little console. There is rumours that there might be a Switch Pro in the mix. Those rumours have been going on for a couple of years now.
Yes, when the Switch OLED was released, it was quite a surprise, I think, to the market that there was no hardware upgrades other than the screen, I think, right?
It's difficult, isn't it? Because what do they do next? They've sold, I think the Switch has got a very high sell-through rate now. It's getting up there with some of the best-selling consoles ever made. And they've got a hell of a precedent there. They've got PlayStation, the PS2 and the PS4 to catch, and the Wii, which sold gangbusters. But they're getting there. It's up there in that conversation now. But what do they do next? If they release a brand new console, do they make all games for your existing Switch library move over? In which case, they're really only going to sell that to the hardcore and sort of newish customers coming to the Switch who haven't already bought one. And 6 years on, I imagine there's probably not too many households now that haven't got as far as a Switch. And the Wii U was a little bit like that. The Wii U was sort of a half-step upgrade from the Wii.
Yeah.
And didn't sell well at all. Or do they release something entirely new and start again? Cut off the old library and start again. It depends what they want to do. There are strong rumours, though, that there may be some sort of hardware revision coming later in the year. I think there is an in-person Nintendo event that's been announced for, I want to say, October or November. We've got it on our calendar to watch, so we'll keep you posted as that develops. But there might be something to talk about there.
It partially probably is because the competition around the space has been heating up over the last couple of years. So it's not just, really the handheld gaming space was dominated by the Switch since it was released, and there hasn't been much competition at all, at least not in the mainstream.
Or even prior to that, really. If you go back, what was the last competitive dedicated handheld? It was probably the Vita, which never really got going.
Early 2010s, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it never reached the popularity of the Switch. And Sony kind of exited that game. until very recently.
Yeah,
Don't know if this is in your notes, but we'll come to it. Again, it's only rumors. Xbox have never entered the game. Obviously,
true.
well, I say never. I suppose xCloud on mobile
Yeah,
devices is
I was just about
sort
to
of a
suggest that.
handheld, but they've never come out with a dedicated piece of hardware. And then, of course, the other gaming companies in the past, like Sega, I mean, their last attempt was the Game Gear, so
Mm.
we're going back quite a long time for that one. I was still a boy when that was a thing. Um, so yeah, as you rightly say, there's not a lot of competition in this space. Certainly not from console manufacturers.
Yep.
But I guess that's where we're going next, isn't it? Is
Yeah, the
the
more PC
the
stuff.
other side of the coin? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the main thing that would pressure them into creating something that's more powerful on the next generation is the fact that the other side of things, the ones that are creating basically PCs in your pocket that you can, download Steam and run games from there, is using really, really quite powerful hardware, to the point where you can run AAA games on these consoles, which is really quite impressive. And so it's drawing that natural comparison between the handheld gaming and what's possible on the Switch compared to the likes of the Steam Deck, which we'll get onto in a bit. But I really like the Switch. I think it's a great concept, and it's it is the only way you can really play Nintendo games now. So and there's some great games in there. I love playing Mario Kart, and Smash Bros. Love it.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because you've picked the two of the titles there, I suppose, where most recently we've seen other companies try to rival them. And in fact, I think just this week or last, there was another entry in the kart racer franchise. I can't remember who it was that who's made one now. I think it's Disney, in fact. Oh, I have that. I'm pretty sure Disney have just released a kart racer. So they're the latest to try their hand at capturing the Mario Kart spirit, but most don't achieve the same kind of excitement or enjoyment that Mario Kart receives. And then Smash Brothers again is another title that has had a couple of contenders in recent years. I think most recently was it Rumbleverse came out and then got turned off. I think was it Rumbleverse that got decommissioned by its developers recently, or was that another one? There's been a handful of kind of mascot fighting games that have come out to try and rival Smash Brothers there as well. So
Yes.
yeah, Nintendo make great software. That's always been their strong point. And I guess their beloved characters like Mario, etc., keep selling systems for them. So
I like the fact they've almost reminded the market that handheld gaming should still be a thing. I think for a long time, maybe console manufacturers and other gaming manufacturers were convinced there wasn't really a market for it anymore. Especially with smartphones, everyone's got games in their pocket, Android games, things like that, iOS games on the go. But I think there is something to be said about a dedicated gaming console that's separate to your smartphone and being portable with a bigger screen and dedicated games.
I think the difference though is that when you talk about mobile gaming, and you go back to the earlier years that we've covered previously, the difference in the power and what could be achieved was so vast that the experiences weren't comparable. Home game consoles and home PCs were moving so much faster in terms of technology, but as that technology's got smaller and smaller, mainly driven probably by mobile phone innovation, that high-powered tech has become more readily available in a much smaller form set. And if you look at what mobiles and tablets are doing now, from a gaming point of view, they're doing some incredible things. Compared to the early experiences. I remember the first game I ever downloaded on my iPhone, proper game, was Monkey Ball, and I remember that was one of the first games available on the App Store when the App Store first launched. And it blew my mind that I could play Monkey Ball on my iPhone. I was like, "This is ridiculous!" This was a console game to me, and for all of its sacrifices, it played as you'd expect. But that's just where we are now with what iPhones and Android devices can do and what they can play. It's just next level compared to that. So I think that the miniaturization of this tech and the power of the tech has made mobile gaming something that doesn't have to feel like a compromise anymore, or isn't best served by the Tetrises of this world. And actually, you can have, as we've seen with Pokemon, for example, on Nintendo Switch, we've taken a beloved Game Boy game and given it a modern gaming look and feel with 3D worlds and a fully realized environment. And that's something you couldn't have done 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it has, like I said, opened up huge opportunity.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. Well, so that moves us on to the next one on the list, where we're going to talk about the Steam Deck. And the reason that I'm hosting this episode, the reason I brought it up as a topic and when we were discussing it, is because I recently purchased, or was brought down on the wish list at least. I pre-ordered it, and it took, for those who don't know, the Steam Deck, the pre-order took many months, over a year, I think, or maybe 6 to 8 months at least, to get it delivered from pre-ordering it. So I actually have one, and so I've been doing lots of handheld gaming on this, and it's definitely a unique take on handheld gaming. First of all, you can see, if you're seeing it on YouTube, it's absolutely massive. It is huge, way bigger than the Switch. If you stack them side by side, the Switch and this, it's basically, the Switch is the size of the Steam Deck screen, without the Joy-Cons, or at least the controllers on the Steam Deck extend out much further. It's also, the depth is much thicker, and you can wrap your hands around the actual controller itself, so it's a bit more ergonomic. Generally, it is a much bigger device, but I really wanted to talk about it because it's so unique that, for the handheld gaming at least, that it's just it's like a marvel that it was brought out with the technology that it's got as well. The fact that you're able to, on the Steam Deck, run Steam games. So basically that, as I was saying before, the PC in your pocket, where you can download your Steam library, existing Steam library if you're a PC gamer like me, which is another reason why I quite like this one over the Switch. You can run them fairly well on a portable device like this. And I mean, go on.
Sorry, Nicky, carry on.
I was going to say, there's just so much you could say about it because there's so many new and interesting things about it. Firstly, the inputs. Sorry, you can see a reflection in there. I'm trying to show you off too much. There is traditional controller inputs. So you have the D-pad, the analog sticks, the triggers. There's just a ridiculous amount of inputs. And on the back, you have the scuff triggers as well. Sorry, I'm taking advantage of the fact that I can show this off, and this is only going to be for YouTube audience, but there are an unbelievable amount of buttons on here, but an extra interesting use, and that's for if you needed to use a mouse and keyboard. It's touchscreen as well, so you can use a keyboard, but you also have a kind of a mouse pad on either side, which are clickable as well to replace the mice. But yeah, it runs on SteamOS, which is a version of Linux. So it is running a PC software as well. It's running Linux, so you can it's a custom OS. It's like a wrapper around Linux that's specifically designed for console use instead of mouse and keyboard. But you can reboot it to actually be a normal Linux version, and it's actually built into the software to do that by default as well. So it is literally a computer in your pocket.
There's no way you get that in your pocket, but I understand the line.
You have to have big pockets. There's a really funny video of
seriously big pockets.
Linus Tech Tips. I think he managed to fit it in his pocket, but he has exceptionally large pockets in his jeans. But yes, perhaps not a pocketable device. It is very, very large. It comes in a few iterations, mostly based on storage size. I think it starts at 64 gigabytes, which with that you can't actually have a lot of games on.
That seems ridiculously small for
it
something
is
that's designed to do what that's supposed to do.
It is. I mean, it has expandable storage in the form of micro SDs. So you can, and I've got one in here as well to expand the storage in mine. So you can add extra games in there to download from your Steam library. It also has a USB-C port on the top, so you can, and that's how you charge it as well. It's got fast charging, so you can charge it quite quickly. But you can also plug in a hard drive if you really wanted to, and have like a portable kind of plug-in game storage system. You're laughing at this, Jay. I don't think this is the one for you.
No, I just like the idea of plugging a hard drive into your already massive handheld and then kind of taping it to the back and wandering around with this, look at my entire collection of games. Yeah. I think it's a really, I mean, I've seen the Steam that you were kind enough to let me have a go on it, and I was very impressed. I think it looks good. It as you said, it is. I think it's more aimed at your PC gamers.
Mm.
Well, it's absolutely aimed at PC gamers. If you've got an existing Steam library, that's the real benefit, isn't it? That's which so many PC gamers, that's their ecosystem. I don't know much about it, to be honest. So it's interesting to hear your take on it. And yes, my initial observation was, wow, this is big. But it wasn't too heavy. It didn't feel uncomfortable. It was pretty quiet from what I remember in terms of its operation, not too noisy. And I think what's interesting with the Steam Deck is relative to others on the market, because it's not the first attempt at a PC handheld, is it? And I know you've got some others to talk about. But it's the first to do it at a price point that felt reasonable. I mean, it was still, I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong, is it circa £500? Is that the kind of ballpark figure for
That's
Steam
right.
Deck?
I think it even starts at $399 for the cheaper one.
So even at the cheapest, I guess it's £100 more than, or more than £100 more than the OLED Switch, which is the top end of those devices. But you're going for a PC handheld, then actually some of the ones that you're going to come on to talk about can go for more than double that. So
yeah,
£500 is actually quite a reasonable entry point for what that is allowing you to do. And I guess for an existing PC gamer who's probably got a quite expensive rig at home, to be able to take that exact library on the move and presumably, correct me if I'm wrong, benefit from cross progression.
Yeah,
between games.
Cloud saves, replicates across the both both.
I guess
systems.
that's title unique to the games that you're playing, but that's a really great proposition for that sort of money. If you've already spent, let's be honest, a decent gaming is going to run you two grand probably. So actually £500 for a handheld gaming PC to give you that extensibility of your library probably feels quite reasonable compared to a gaming laptop as an alternative. So yeah, I think I can completely understand why it's been so popular. They are really cool. As I said, as someone who doesn't have a PC library to talk of really, I don't think it's the way to play Football Manager, is it? Which is the only real PC game I own. It doesn't really have any value for me. But I can see for a Steam user who's got an extensive game library, what a great way to take those games they've already bought. And that's the other thing, isn't it? This isn't about buy a Steam Deck and have to buy loads more games. If you've got a Steam library, then many of those games are already designed to run on the Steam Deck. Many will run even if they're not kind of accredited, so to speak. So yeah, you can buy a piece of hardware and have an instant game library at no additional cost.
You're absolutely right about the price point as well. For the hardware that you're getting in here, it is competitive enough to compete with the £1,000 devices that I'll talk about later. But it's almost benefiting from the console economics. It's going to make a lot of money from the games that it's selling because the only store that it's available on the device is Steam, and they'll get a certain cut through the software that's sold. So it's the same with any of the consoles that you get.
And now you're okay with that concept.
Well, if it allows me to buy it for way cheaper.
yeah.
Okay. When
an Apple logo on the back, you'd feel differently.
When Apple half the price of their devices for the benefit of the software, then I'll definitely do it. But that's what I mean. It's so like the PS5s and the Xbox Ones are generally making a loss on their consoles, the hardware itself, because they recognize that they can make quite a lot of money in the software.
I think this shows the first time PlayStation has declared that's not the case for them.
Oh, really? Okay.
So PlayStation came out this year and said that they were going to sell at profit. Sure, that was the first time they said they've done that.
Interesting. Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised if Xbox have taken a hit.
Well, I guess the Steam Deck's previous generation of economics then for game consoles, and that I'm pretty sure they're making a loss on it because the hardware is exceptional for the price, but they must be making their money in software and selling.
It's retention, isn't it? And it's a clever move from Steam, in many respects, because they have seen other people trying to take a slice of their pie. Epic Games had invested a lot of money and did some similarly dirty tactics to lock certain games into their ecosystem. Take you over to their launcher. EA tried for a little while, didn't they, with Origin? I think that's now gone. Microsoft have got their Game Pass Ultimate, so they're having a crack at that as well. And even PlayStation, I think now they've got an ecosystem to talk of. I think the PS Now extends to PC. It's not great, I don't think, but so I guess for Steam, this is a clever move to keep them popular with their audience.
Absolutely.
Keep them relevant. and like you said, lock you into an ecosystem, much like the much maligned Apple.
True, that is true. Though there is much more flexibility, I'd say, with this
I'm joking.
than the traditional. No, I'm saying just generally, like even compared to the Switch, in that it is Linux that's on here, and you can literally reboot it into a desktop style version of Linux. Even though there's a skin that you can wrap around to make it look like, if you've ever used Steam, it looks a bit like Big Picture in Steam, which is like the if you press the big picture mode, it turns it into like a console experience on your PC where you can just navigate only with the controller and things like that. That's kind of what it looks like as the OS on here. So it's quite user friendly to navigate around, but you can reboot it into that desktop environment, so you can make full use of Linux. So navigate the web. You can plug in a keyboard if you really wanted to, and use a mouse, and use it as a proper kind of portable PC if you really wanted to. And there are docks available that you can plug this in, so you can connect it to monitors and plug in USB devices as well, like keyboard and mouse.
Oh, I've just been you've segued perfectly to something I wanted to just quickly mention, actually, which was USB devices.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I know that from a power consumption perspective, what I'm about to say makes absolutely no sense. But I wonder to what extent the Steam Deck could support low-level VR. I asked the question because I'm thinking about big screen VR specifically, which is that recently announced bespoke, molded to your face. Your lens is preloaded for your eye requirements, and
yeah,
it's almost like a pair of goggles, but they are PC VR ultimately. Which is how they're allowed to be as sort of lightweight and easygoing as they are, and small. I wonder if something like that could run on a Steam Deck. Maybe not this iteration, maybe a future iteration, but it'd be interesting to see if Steam Deck has the capabilities or the grunt to be able to run some sort of VR experience, even if it's passive, and not a game, but perhaps even just a movie experience.
Quick Googling says that it does support MetaQuest 2 with the wire. Is that right? I think you can wire up with the MetaQuest, can't you?
Yes, yeah. The Quest can be used as PC VR as long as you have the USB-C link cable.
Again, not verified, just a quick Google. But I think this is suggesting that there's a way you can connect it.
Next time we're together, we'll try it, because I've got the Quest and the link cable. You've got the Steam Deck. Let's see if we can make it work.
That would be cool.
If we can, we'll film our efforts. How about that?
Yeah.
We'll pop it on YouTube if we can do
it. Excellent. But I think it's a really exciting console because there's a massive community behind it now who are doing their own development and posting things on like GitHub that you can custom install. There's lots you can customize it. And to your previous episode point, there is emulation available on here. There's a big community of emulators who are keen and have managed to get it working on here.
I don't remember talking about emulation.
Oh, do you not? Oh, no. Yeah.
No, I don't remember that conversation. Let's move on. So, I mean, we've talked about the two biggest players in this space, and I'm just mindful of time for the episode, so as not to run too far over, which is our habit. But what we've got there are some honourable. Try again. Are there some honourable mentions?
Yes.
That you wanted to sort of go through, because I know that there's more alternatives if you didn't want to buy a Steam Deck or a Switch.
Yes, no, that's right. So yes, they are the two main players, I'd say, in this space at the moment. And the pricing of the Steam Deck is interesting because it's between the Switch, which is lower level hardware, but still able to support its own ecosystem of games. And then on the other side is the likes of Ioneo is a company that makes handheld gaming as well, and it looks very similar to the Switch Lite, I guess, or the Steam Deck. I've just brought it up for those who are watching it on YouTube. And Ioneo actually have a bunch of different versions. They have a light version. They have different ranges of budgets and different ranges of power, and also different ranges of what it's specifically aiming to do. So there is one purely dedicated to retro gaming, and the color of it even looks like the original Game Boy. I don't know if you can see that. If I zoom in just a little bit on that one, called the Ioneo 2021 Pro Retro. So there's lots of different versions of these, but these ones, they're running very powerful hardware, PC level hardware. Again, they're running Windows, so different to the Steam Deck in that it's a bit more flexible with Windows. something I didn't mention before on the Steam Deck is there's quite a lot of games that still aren't supported. They do have a rating system in the Steam store to tell you when it is supported, when some needs additional configuration to get working, and when some just don't flat out don't work. But when it's Windows on the devices like these, everything will work because Steam is pretty much Windows first. Everything that's built on the store will work on Windows. So these devices, there's IO Neo, and there's another one as well that I've got called One X Player. Very similar in that they're very top end hardware that's possible to fit in these handheld consoles anyway. Running Windows, amazing screens. I think that's one of the big criticisms of the Steam Deck is this the screen took a bit of a hit in that cost. We think it's not as good as it could be. I still think it's
but then there'll
perfectly
be
fine
a
for
Steam Deck
handhelds.
Pro at some point, which will bring you
There will be
super fancy OLED.
Steam Deck OLED.
What we're not talking about here, because I'm conscious you're showing some of these on screen, is the price though.
Yes.
At £500 for a Steam Deck, you're talking what? So the One X Player you've got on screen now,
£1,200.
£1,250, which is a bit of a jump. That's a big investment, and interestingly, you're pretty surprised to know I'm quite familiar with the IO Neos.
How are you?
I've seen a lot of only through content I've seen online. I've obviously never handled one. There's a YouTuber very popular called Beat 'em Ups, a guy called Woodhawker, and he's done quite in-depth videos on a number of these. He's well known for being a bit of a Nintendo Switch fan, and he's kind of tried these out as alternatives and given, and likewise he's done the Steam Deck as well. He kind of covers these things at length. So if you're interested to see these being utilized and used, have a look at his channel because he's covered most of these IO Neo devices you were just going through. Where they tend to fall down, he often mentions his battery life.
Yep.
I guess it's no surprise with a powerful device like this when it's so portable. And noise. Apparently the fans can get quite loud on these things and they run quite hot.
I've seen a few reviews, and it's not necessarily the noise, it's the pitch that people tend to complain about. With them being smaller devices and smaller fans, they typically have a bit of a higher pitched whine to them, which can be a bit more off-putting than just the traditional fan noise. So yeah, I've heard that as a similar complaint as well. But yeah, you rightly pointed out that's why I think the Steam Deck is very compelling in the market, because it's about half the price of these competitors that are able to do proper PC gaming on the go.
And like you said, if you're with the Steam Deck, it's maybe a slightly different proposition. You're probably buying that as an accompaniment to an existing gaming rig. I don't know with this IO Neo at the price point that they're talking about here, and likewise the other one you just showed, they are pushing the price of a low-level gaming laptop. I would have thought, in excess of £1,000. At which point you've got to ask yourself the question: what am I paying for here? What's most important to me here?
It's definitely for the people who've got the cash for it.
But I think the price point of the Steam Deck keeps it. It doesn't feel like it's kind of encroaching on those gaming laptops, and it doesn't feel like you're spending the same money you've already spent on a rig to take those games somewhere else. It feels like it's got. I mean, it's still £500. It's not cheap. You could buy a next-gen console for that. But if you're into PC gaming, you're probably already used to spending quite big on your hardware. It feels like quite a nice compromise to give you portability. Whereas these, I don't know, again, if you've got the cash, like you said, if money's no object or you can afford it and that's your passion, then you do you. But it feels like at over £1,000, that's a hell of a lot of money. And you could buy quite a comprehensive experience, on a console or even a decent PC for that.
I suspect that the target audience for this are people who've already got that. Similar to the Steam Deck, you can make use of the library that you've already got on here and Steam, but also other launchers. So if you've got a gaming PC and you're making use of Epic Games, the Blizzard, Blizzard.net launcher, or any of the others, this is going to be able to take full advantage of that as well. So I suspect it is more towards those who have a gaming rig and have the funds to be able to add an additional console that they're able to take around with them. Based on that ecosystem of games they've already purchased.
It's a huge outlay, though, isn't it?
It is.
And I suspect you're absolutely right, but it's a huge outlay.
It is
a lot of money.
Again, it's just
as a humble console gamer, Robbie, it's too much for me.
Yeah, well, these are definitely.
I could buy so much more tech with that. Yeah,
and then that's the other thing about the Steam Deck is it's not just price-wise positioned like between the console world and the PC world. It's also the OS, because they've got that nice skin around it that when you're using it, it feels like it's a dedicated console rather than like a Windows or anything like that. Whereas these devices, I think, are just flat out Windows. When you load it up, it's just a desktop on Windows. And it feels like an enthusiast community that would tend to go for these devices as well, because there's lots of additional things you need to consider as well. Like there is hotkeys to use the start button and things like that, where it's not as easy, I think, to get around to launch games. There's a bit of configurability that you need to take into account when using something like this, which is why I think it's more of an enthusiast, a tinkerer tool again.
Yeah. So if we were to, come back to our previous episode, I suppose it falls more into the Android bucket and less into the
100%.
Apple in terms of kind of ecosystem. It just works versus I want to be able to customize and tinker with every element of this.
Yeah.
Whereas, as you say, the Steam Deck maybe falls slightly weirdly in between, but maybe a little more to the Apple side of the world and a little less towards the Android configurability side.
It's got
interesting.
Got a bit of both, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's so attractive to so many people. Is that if you really want to, you can just. I mean, I've seen videos online of people absolutely hacking the hell out of the Steam Deck, and even physically as well as software-wise. I've seen people put physical coolers on the back, actually boring out the side and adding on attachments. I've seen on the software side, people running Windows, full-fat Windows on here, which it is technically possible, but I can't imagine runs as efficiently as it could with the traditional software. The other thing is that iFixit as a platform. I don't know if you've heard of that platform. It's it's you get the tools, and you also can get parts on there to fix devices, like phones and MacBooks and things like that. They have all of the components to the Steam Deck on there, and so I mean, there's jokes before, and that was even before it was launched. There's jokes before it launched about how you could build a Steam Deck with the components that you could buy from iFixit beforehand, and so it's got a very tinkerer community behind it because of all these additional things you can do on top of it. But for the bog standard user, it's so usable as well. So it's definitely a mix of both. And I sound like an absolute fanboy, but I don't care. I absolutely love it.
So I'm going to take you in a slightly different direction, and this is a rumor, so nothing more than that at the moment. But I think no smoke without fire. There have been rumors recently. I don't know if you've read about these, Robbie, as well, that PlayStation might be preparing to release a handheld. And you might go, hurrah, finally, the follow-up to the PS Vita. I'm super excited. Well, I'm here to tell you to temper that excitement, because apparently the rumors are this will be they're saying it's a device that will not be independent of its console. It will require you to own a PS5, and it's essentially a remote play device only. So this is the rumor very recently. Now, where does that fall in the handheld space? I don't really know.
Funny,
but they're saying that it's apparently it's going to be effectively a PS5 controller with a screen in the middle and the relevant hardware required to remote connect to your PS5, which you can do already with an iPhone or an iPad, and it works very well. I'm not quite sure why you'd want that in your house. I guess if your TV's being used and you want to sit you want to go to bed and you play it, and there might be some use cases.
Phone, though. I don't understand. Yeah, that's a strange one. But it does.
I was going to say that because there's a product called just very quickly. There's a product called the Backbone. Are you familiar with the Backbone?
I'm not actually.
So the Backbone, and there's others. I think Razer make an equivalent. It's effectively a snap-on controller for your mobile phone.
Yes, yeah, I have seen.
So it kind of stretches, but it's they originally released it and it had the Xbox configuration, the Xbox layout, and it did quite well. It got quite popular, sold out. You could never get your hands on them. And then they brought one out in PlayStation's colors with PlayStation buttons, and it's selling gangbusters. But it doesn't. It isn't a portable PlayStation. It kind of sells itself that way, but it's no different to what we've just described. Whichever way you choose to go with that, Xbox, PlayStation, or your native Apple Arcade apps, the Backbone effectively turns your mobile phone into a Switch, for want of a better word, and gives you controllers that are integrated. They connect to your device, they plug in by the port on the bottom of the phone, and then you've got full controllers and a phone quality of a phone screen, I suppose, playing your games in whatever format you try to play, whether that's streaming, remote play, or locally on the device. And I quite like those. And for sort of circa £100, I think the backbone costs. I've been very interested. I've, a few times I've nearly pulled the trigger, and then I've resisted because I don't get enough time to play the games I've got, let alone buying more accessories to give me more things not to play. But yeah, it's absolutely worth a look if you've never come across the backbone before. Have a look.
I haven't, but what I do
have
have
a watch.
as an alternative to that is I have an Xbox controller, Xbox One controller, is what I use on my PC if I'm playing games. I've got a little clip, so I can clip my phone to the top of the controller and have it like what I can take it on the go and have my phone and connect to the phone for the games and things like that. That I think is actually the preferred format rather than I think the one that you're talking about is like on the side, right, where you have the screen in the middle. It looks cool, definitely, but I think I actually prefer the other one because it puts the phone a bit closer to your face, like it's a display, and you're playing on like a mini tiny laptop with a controller.
Yeah, I also have one of those clips, and I like the experience. It worked well. I wonder whether I don't know how the backbone works, so again, I might be wrong, but I think by connecting it to the device, probably remove any kind of input lag or risk of the Bluetooth issues. But yeah, I did try that clip on the phone, and it worked very well. The only thing I will say is, as well as Microsoft have as well as they've designed their controllers to be able to connect both the Xbox and to a phone, I don't find the sort of swapping between the two to be particularly intuitive.
No.
And so you'd almost want a dedicated controller for your phone, which then, I mean, you can use PS5 or Xbox on an iPhone now since they updated the iOS maybe a year or two ago. But I don't know. It's a lot of money to shell out for a dedicated controller. So less than a backbone, I suppose, by the time you bought the clip and a dedicated controller if you haven't already got one. Yes, definitely an option. 100% an option.
If that rumor about Sony is true, that's really disappointing if they're only going to do streaming gaming, because I think if they're only focusing on Sony streaming as well and not allowing you, for example, which I can't imagine they would, but allow you to do xCloud or any other devices, there are already devices out there that are dedicated for this. And one of the things I was going to bring up, if I just bring it up really quickly, is Logitech released a device called Logitech's GCloud, which is, again, it looks similar to like a Steamdeck / Switch / whatever handheld gaming device that you might go for, but it doesn't do any local gaming at all. It's all streaming. So they rely on things like xCloud, I think PlayStation Now, or any of the other services that you can stream games on. So there's nothing that's ran locally. And what's surprising about this device is it's still very expensive. I think it was $299 or $349, which at that point price is close to an OLED Switch. So, and then if Sony did something similar, they'd be competing with this, which is already, I think, a flop. And it's focusing on more than just PS Now. It's other streaming services.
There's a very crude mock-up that someone's done, which is, it's not an official image; it's a concept, but you can see what they're envisaging. I've just put it in the Notion file just for you to have a quick look at. And for those watching along, we can bring this up on screen. We can include it in the show notes if it's worth looking at. But right at the bottom of the indie and alternatives list, there's a very long Google hyperlink.
What you're sending me? Oh, okay.
That was a mock-up that someone had made, and it's effectively a
just looks like a PS5 controller cut in half
between a PS5 controller. I like you said, I'm a bit torn with this because I don't really understand. If I could take my PS5 library on the go, then I completely think this could sell well and probably would sell well. If it is, though, as the rumor is that it's purely to play remote play, and you were going to do that most often in your house because taking it anywhere externally is problematic with Wi-Fi speeds and stuff like that. It can be done. Not a great experience. Who knows? But as you said, that experience is already doable on an iPad, on an iPhone, on an Android device. Yeah. I mean, you can even do it through a PS4. So I've had my PS4 in the living room, and I've remote played my PS5 from my games room in my living room, and it worked very well.
I didn't know you could do that. That's wild.
Yeah. So who's it for? I don't know. But I'll be honest, if they released it, I'd have to have a look. But I can't imagine that it will be cheap. I mean, if you think that a controller for the PS5, I think it runs £60, 50 to £60 at the moment. Is I think the going rate. Then you've got to stick a screen and some sort of operating system in the middle in order to connect you to your PS5. You're probably looking at a couple £100 for a decent OLED screen and a shell, and so you could be looking at 250, 300 quid before you've got going for this handheld device to just simply stream your things around the room. Maybe I've got those prices wrong. Those are just
well, I mean, the screens themselves are expensive. So
that's it. What kind of screen would they put on it? You're not going to want to remote play your 4K PlayStation 5 on a crappy 720p screen, are you?
I mean, 720 at that scale is not bad at all.
No.
But the OLEDs are expensive, which I imagine they would go for.
Well, yeah, and there's the buffering. Well, I don't know if they would. They went with an OLED. If you remember on the PS Vita, the early PS Vitas were OLED, and then part of the way through that life cycle, they iterated on that, and then they switched them out for cheaper screens, which made them easier to produce, and they could knock the price down slightly. And when I bought my PS Vita, I went out of my way to get an older model to get the OLED because that's what I wanted to see the experience through.
That's the other thing I'm confused about. Sony have experience with handheld gaming already, where they built an ecosystem of their own games and they had dedicated hardware and things like that. So it's really surprising if they take this angle. I mean,
they did, but if you remember, the Vita was heavily criticised for not getting enough support from Sony, and not getting enough software, not making sure that enough good titles were developed for it. And a lot of people blame the Vita's lack of success, for want of a better word, on that lack of a library. And there's also precedent for that because, as we touched on in previous episodes, the PSVR 1 lacked real first-party support for big gaming experiences. And quite frankly, so far, unfortunately, the PSVR 2 is looking like getting similar support from Sony. There's a huge call from the community, the VR community, for PlayStation to show their cards and to really get behind this and give us a roadmap of titles to look forward to and software to shift the system, because ultimately it is software that shifts these things.
Yeah.
Xbox are finding that pain at the moment with their console and lack of exclusives. PlayStation are running away with sales on the PS5 because they've got some great titles that are already out and a whole load of great ones coming up, not least the new Spider-Man. But yet these handhelds and VR, as we've kind of moved on to, they're not getting that support. So they do need to put the software behind it, and so it'll be very interesting to see if they do anything with handheld, and if it is, whether it's this rumored remote play or not, and exactly how that will work. They could wow us. Let's be honest. Mobile internet is getting better all the time. Who knows what this device could be capable of? I just don't have high hopes for streaming games on the go or from a hotel room with my PS5 in my office somewhere.
Yeah,
just don't think that's going to work very well.
Can you imagine them trying to ship it with 5G and then like a EE contractor? Oh god, I don't even want to think about it.
I mean, they could do. But yeah.
Okay, so we're coming up on time. There's a few other things I was going to show, so I'm going to do a quick fire of random formats of handheld gaming that I've seen and that I thought you might get a kick out of. Just to finish us off, we've got one device called the GPD Win Max 2021, which, if you remember the old
catchy name, isn't it?
Yeah, I know.
What's that you're carrying there, Robbie? It's the GPD Win Max 2021.
Just the Win Max, the GPD, the 2021 version. Yeah.
Only 2 years old as well, I guess. Assuming that's naming convention is its year of release.
It looks fairly retro. And if you remember the old netbooks, tiny netbooks, the tiny laptops that you used to be able to get in like the early 2010s, that were like the power netbooks. It looks kind of like that. It looks like a laptop, but it has at the very top, I don't know if you can make that out, it has analog sticks, it has a mouse pad in the middle, it has a D-pad.
Oh god, that looks awful.
It does, doesn't it? And it basically is a laptop.
Look like it's fun to hold.
No,
it's horrible.
No. So this is a really weird format. So basically, for those listening,
out in the links, everyone, if you're listening, go and check this out, or give a quick Google.
It's
Or
pretty
watch the
awful.
video, but yeah, wow, that's
Again,
terrible.
though, really powerful hardware in there. It's got an i7 in there. It's got an i7 Intel chip and Xe graphics. I mean, the hardware is undeniably amazing, but the form factor looks incredibly uncomfortable. It's essentially a laptop, but imagine holding the laptop at the very top of the keyboard and putting your thumbs where the speakers might be for the D-pad and the analog sticks, and then having the screen like right up to your face. It is much smaller than I think it looks in the images. You can see in that it's
Oh no, they're not even proper analog sticks. They're like little nipples.
yeah.
Oh god, they're like those horrible trackpads.
Yeah.
Oh, that's just
Yeah.
no, that's horrible.
So
No,
there's a form factor for you if you ever wanted a weird laptop hybrid thing. Okay, that's the GBD Win Max. The next one we've got is called the Pocket Analog, and this one I thought you
I'm
might quite
familiar
like.
with this.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I heard of this. So the Analog Pocket was, I think it was again one of these, a bit like the Steam Deck. It was pre-ordered. They were that you couldn't just go and readily buy one of these,
Mm.
and they are essentially, like you said, little retro beasts with amazing screens and the capability to play all sorts of retro games. They look great.
Yeah, including all cartridges. So for those listening, it looks like I'd say a Game Boy Color, but thinner and a bit sleeker, and it's got a nice OLED screen, I think.
Buttons as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and it does have a slot on the back so that you can have old cartridges and it'll run old. It looks like Game Boy Advance games, original Game Boy games, and Game Boy Color games as well. You can run all these in the slot in the back, except it's got modern hardware, so it's got a nice screen for you to play it on. I think it'll have a memory card in there, so you could probably load up your own emulators if you want to as well. A very cool console, I think. It's even got shoulder buttons.
I know that was incredibly well received when it came out. Lots of people were clamoring for them. They were selling or reselling for crazy money on eBay when they first came out. I don't know what the buying situation is now, whether they're more readily available.
At the top of the site, it said pre-order still. So,
oh wow, okay,
yeah, so it might still be out there. But yeah, I thought that was a very cool form factor. That kind of Game Boy look-alike, but with modern hardware. And then this last one is my favorite. It's a very, very small, very, very small device. It's called the Playdate, and it's a wind-up one. It has a little wind-up on the side, so you can generate some power for it. That's what that little metal thing is on the right there.
I thought that was for interfacing with the games. Is that definitely a wind-up for power?
Oh, I could be making that up, but
this video is about.
I thought it was designed
it is.
for
Yeah,
unique play experiences. Yeah. I mean, it is, but I don't think it's for powering the device.
Is it not? Oh, I could be making that up.
No, it's an interface, so you can actually use it to play games. So the idea is that you can design specific experiences for that console. The crank look.
Does it charge the play? Nope, it doesn't. Oh, I thought it charged it. Okay, fair enough.
Simply scrolling on your research would have taught you that wasn't the play.
Well, this is why I've got you on. You're more thorough than me.
I had already heard about this, and a lot of people have raved about it. It's one of those that probably a novelty. I don't know to what extent it's getting lots of support to kind of make use of it, but I like the idea of it.
It's a very small device.
Very retro, isn't it? Yeah.
Very small device, very retro. Imagine a Game Boy Color in yellow that's been halved in size, and it's also very thin. It has a crank on the right, which I suppose now we realize is part of the interface, part of the controllers. One thing I did notice about this is that the games that it plays, it's specific for the device. So it's an indie developer that develops the games for the sites. I think it's the same as the hardware maker. And so that is something
but
that's...
I could be wrong. I think you can also develop for it yourself.
Yeah.
So it's like eventually community developed. So I think you can build your own experiences, sharing with others. But it's, like you said, very much a unique experience, unique hardware, unique games that you won't get anywhere else.
Very indie. Very, very indie. It's black and white as well, the screen. It's just very small, a very cute little device. I'll include a link on this one because I think it's quite a fun one. And I just love the fact it's got a little crank on it, even if it's not to power it, which I'm maybe a little disappointed at that. But
can you imagine, though, getting halfway through a game and then having to frantically crank that somewhere in public to generate enough power to carry on? I mean, I imagine having to generate enough power to even make that charge the battery for a few minutes of gameplay would probably be a lot more cranking than you probably would expect. I don't know that is feasible.
That's proper indie, though, isn't it? It would be proper indie.
What you need is a Steam Deck powered by an exercise bike that you just sit on and you have to pedal, and then you play with your hands and you pedal with your legs to keep the thing going. And then as the power starts to dwindle, you pedal harder.
Absolutely. So there you go. That's that modern handheld gaming, and there's probably going to be some more announcements this year. Other devices that have come out. I know Ioneo bring out devices all the time. They had about 5 or 6 different devices out now with different varying levels of budgets and power. So I imagine there'll be something out this year. So we'll just keep an eye on the space, and it would be cool to see a new version of the Switch and to see what Sony do as well. But yeah, let's leave it there. So that's it for today's episode. Thanks for hanging out with us to the very end. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube. God, I can't even speak on this last one. So you don't miss any of the podcasts. And you can also check us out on Twitch at JNRobbie, where we'll be streaming 3 times a week, roughly, playing a variety of games. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time.